Good evening everyone, this is Dr. Krishnan.K and today we are going to discuss regarding the anatomy of internal ear or the inner ear. So in the previous class we have discussed regarding the middle ear cavity. So let's have a look into the features of internal ear. The internal ear, it lies in the petrous part of the temporal bone and it is an organ of hearing and balance. And basically the internal ear is composed of two parts. There is a bony labyrinth and a membranous labyrinth. So it's very easy to remember. Basically it is having two parts, the bony labyrinth and the membranous labyrinth. So here I have made a model so that you can clearly visualize the bony labyrinth and the membranous labyrinth. So the white color represents the bony labyrinth, which covers the complete membranous labyrinth, or you can say the membranous labyrinth is floating within the bony labyrinth. So this pink color represents the membranous labyrinth and the white color represents the bony labyrinth. And there are two fluids which are present within this. So first we will discuss the fluid that is present between the membranous labyrinth and the bony labyrinth. So this white colored area is filled by a fluid called as perilymph, while this pink colored area, that is nothing but the inside of the membranous labyrinth, which is filled by endolymph. So let's discuss about them in detail. So the perilymph resembles the extracellular fluid and it fills the space between the bony and the membranous labyrinth, and it communicates with CSF, that is the cerebrospinal fluid, through the aqueduct of Cochlea, and it opens in the scala tympani near the round window. We have seen two windows on the medial wall of the middle ear cavity, that was the oval window and the round window. So this perilymph opens into the scala tympani near the round window, and the endolymph fills the entire membranous labyrinth, and it resembles the intracellular fluid, and it is very rich in potassium ions. So let's discuss regarding the bony labyrinth in detail. So the bony labyrinth is composed of three parts, that is the cochlea anteriorly, the vestibule in the middle, and the semicircular canals in the posterior part. So there are three parts for the bony labyrinth: the cochlea, vestibule, and the semicircular canals. So here only you can see the white colored part that represents the bony labyrinth. So this over here is the cochlea, the vestibule, and the semicircular canals. Always remember, there will be some confusions at the last, but make the things clear before you go to the next slide. So this one over here is the semicircular canals. So there are three semicircular canals here, and this is the vestibule and this is the cochlea. So here there is a more clarified picture with the marked areas. The cochlea, you can see it is a coiled structure, and here you can see a vestibule, and here you can see the semicircular canals. So I have named the semicircular canals, it's very easy to understand. The upper one is the superior or anterior semicircular canal, this is the posterior semicircular canal, and this one over here on the side is this lateral semicircular canal. So the cochlea, the first thing is cochlea. It resembles the shell of a common snail, and it's a coiled tube which makes 2.5 to 2.75 turns around a central axis of bone, that is the modiolus, and the dimensions are 35 into 5 into 9 millimeter across its base, and it lies in front of the vestibule. And if you just refer the previous picture, you will come to know the location of this cochlea. And the cochlea is composed of two parts, the apex and the base. The apex is anterior superior part of the medial wall of the middle ear, while the base is the fundus of the internal acoustic meatus. These are very easy things to remember. So along with the presentation, you have to prepare your own notes, adding up the points which you can find on the further references. And the cochlea is having a spiral lamina, that is the spiral ridge of bone which projects from the modiolus, which divides the cochlear canal into two parts, that is the scala vestibuli above and the scala tympani below. And since it is a part of the bony labyrinth, what will be filling inside that? Obviously, the perilymph will be filled within these cavities. So, the scala vestibuli above and the scala tympani below, and the division between the passages is completed by the basilar membrane. So, these all things we will see in the diagram coming up. Then the canals communicate with each other at the apex of cochlea by the small opening called helicotrema. So, this perilymph which is present in the scala vestibuli and the scala tympani will communicate with each other at the apex of the cochlea, where there is a small opening called as helicotrema. So, this is an important point to remember. The fluids within the scala vestibuli and scala tympani will communicate through the helicotrema, which is a small opening at the apex of cochlea. So, here you can have a cross sectional image of the cochlear canal, which is divided into two parts by the bony ridge projecting from the modiolus. This is the bony ridge projecting from modiolus. So, the upper one is the scala vestibuli and the lower one is the scala tympani, and they are separated by the basilar membrane. So, here I have marked the basilar membrane. And you might be confused, there is another pink color area in the middle that we will be discussing later. That is a part of the membranous labyrinth. That is why it has got the name the duct. That we will look into that later. So, now just try to remember the scala vestibuli above and the scala tympani below, which is separated by a ridge projecting from the modiolus, and they are separated clearly by the basilar membrane. And the cochlea is having three openings at its base, that is the fenestra vestibuli, the oval window, the fenestra cochleae, the round window, and the cochlear canaliculus. The cochlear canals will be having three openings. So, these are the respective openings. You can note down the three openings. And the vestibule, the second part of the bony labyrinth, that is the vestibule, which is ovoid in shape, and dimensions are 5 into 3 millimeters and forms the central part of the bony labyrinth. And the lateral wall of this vestibule opens to the middle ear at the fenestra vestibuli or the oval window. It is closed by the foot plate of stapes. So, we have seen in the medial wall of the middle ear cavity there was fenestra vestibuli or the oval window, which is covered by the foot plate of stapes. So, while explaining the middle ear cavity, I was explaining about the oval window. So, try to remember the same, and you can refer the previous video if you have any doubts. And the three semicircular canals opens into the posterior wall of vestibule through 5 openings. So, I have told you about the semicircular canals. There were 3 in number, but they just have 5 openings. That is quite unusual, right? Why there is 3 canals but they have only 5 openings? That we will see later. So, keep listening. The medial wall is related to the internal acoustic meatus. So, let us discuss regarding the semicircular canals. The semicircular canals are 3 in number: the anterior or superior semicircular canal, the posterior semicircular canal, and the lateral semicircular canal. These are the 3 semicircular canals, and these are all about 0.8 millimeter in diameter and posterior superior to the vestibule. And a peculiar feature is there: all these canals are lying in right angles to each other. That is an important point to remember. That particular arrangement is there because of their functional mechanism. So, they are lying in right angles to each other, and the canal is dilated at one end to form a dilation called as the ambula, which is 2 millimeter in diameter. So, here you can see the semicircular canals. So, this one over here is the anterior or superior semicircular canal, and this one over here is the posterior semicircular canal, and this one over here is the lateral semicircular canal. And I have asked you a question in the previous slide, like there are 3 semicircular canals, but there are only 5 openings into the vestibule. Why is it like that? So here you can see the anterior or superior semicircular canal and the posterior semicircular canal joins together to form the crest commune. So this joining point is called as the crest commune, and it will open as a single opening into the vestibule. So the superior or anterior semicircular canal joins with the posterior semicircular canal to form the crest commune, and at this point you can see a dilation in the semicircular canal. So at one end of the semicircular canal there is a dilation called as ambula. So this part is called as ambula. You can see the respective ambulas here. So these are the ambulas, and each semicircular canal in detail. Superior or anterior semicircular canal, that is 15 to 20 millimeter in length, and it lies in vertical plane. It is projecting convex upwards, and ambula is facing anterolaterally. And the posterior end of ambula unites with the upper end of posterior canal to form the crest commune. So here you can revise it. This is called the crest commune here, which is the joining of the anterior or superior semicircular canal with the posterior semicircular canal. The posterior semicircular canal, which is also 18 to 22 millimeter in length, vertical plane, and it is convex backwards, and ambula lies at a lower end, and you know about the crest commune already, the joining of anterior and posterior semicircular canals. And note the feature that one was facing convex upwards, and the second one, that is the posterior semicircular canal, that is facing convex backwards, making them right angles to each other. So the last one is the lateral semicircular canal, that is 12 to 15 millimeter in length, and it lies in a right angle to both of these other semicircular canals. So it lies in a horizontal plane, and the convexity is directed posterolaterally, and the ambula lies anteriorly. So these are the features that you have to note down regarding each semicircular canals. So our bony labyrinth is over. It was composed of the cochlea, then the vestibule, and the semicircular canals. Now we will have a look into the membranous labyrinth of the internal ear. So the membranous labyrinth is complicated, but it is a continuous closed cavity filled with endolymph. So in the previous pictures you have seen the membranous labyrinth. I have clearly explained about the pink colored area within the bony labyrinth, and I have told you about the fluid which is filled within that. It was endolymph, which is similar to that of the intracellular fluid. And functionally the membranous labyrinth is lined by the specialized epithelium, which is having some receptors for the function of hearing, maintenance of static balance, and the kinetic balance. So the membranous labyrinth is composed of 3 components: the component which helps in hearing, components which helps in static balance, and the components which help in the kinetic balance. So let's have a look into them. The 3 parts of the membranous labyrinth are the spiral duct of cochlea anteriorly, which is an organ of hearing which will help in hearing, then the utricle and saccule, which is placed within the vestibule, and it helps in maintaining the static balance, and the semicircular ducts, not canals, the semicircular ducts, which is the organ of kinetic balance. So these are the 3 parts of the membranous labyrinth. I repeat: the spiral duct of cochlea, the utricle and saccule within the vestibule, and the semicircular duct which is present within the semicircular canals. So that is the difference between the semicircular canal and the duct. The duct is located within the canal. So here you can have a clear idea about these structures. So this whole pink colored area is the membranous labyrinth. So here you can see the spiral cochlear duct, which is opening into the saccule and the utricle, and the utricle is having connections from the semicircular ducts, which are located within the semicircular canals. So these are the semicircular ducts. So each of them we will just explain. The spiral duct of Cochlea or the scala media. So in a previous cross-sectional picture of the cochlear, the bony cochlea, we have seen a central triangular pink colored area, which I told like I will be explaining later. So that part is nothing but the spiral duct of cochlea or scala media. It is the middle part of the cochlear canal, lies between the scala vestibuli and the scala tympani, and it is triangular in cross section, and the floor is basilar membrane, while the roof is formed by the racemous membrane, and the outer wall is formed by the bony wall of cochlea. So let's have a look into that. So here I have highlighted that particular area, that is the spiral duct of cochlea or scala media with a red triangle. So this area is called as the cochlear duct or the spiral duct of cochlea or the scala media is triangular in cross section, and it is located between the scala vestibuli above and the scala tympani below. And the limits or the boundaries of this cochlear duct or the scala media, the roof is formed by a membrane called as racemous membrane. This is racemous membrane which forms the roof of scala media, and this is the basilar membrane which forms the floor of the cochlear duct or the scala media, and the outer wall is formed by the bony wall of cochlea. So this is the bony wall of cochlea which forms the outer wall of scala media. So that is clear for you, I hope. And let's have a look into the second part, that is the saccule and the utricle, which helps in the maintenance of the static balance. So the shape of saccule is globular in shape, which is 1 to 1.5 millimeters in diameter, and the saccule is connected to the utricle through a Y-shaped tube to the endolymphatic duct and the sac. So remember, the saccule and utricles are separate, but they are connected by a Y-shaped tube. And the utricle is irregular oblong in structure, and it is 2 to 5 millimeter in diameter, and it is larger than that of the saccule, and it receives 5 openings from 3 semicircular ducts. So the semicircular ducts you have seen, right? So there are 3 semicircular ducts which is having 5 openings, and that will be opening into the utricle. And the duct of the saccule, I have told you about the connection between the saccule and utricle. The duct of the saccule unite with the utricle to form the ductus endolymphaticus, and the ductus endolymphaticus end in a dilation called as saccus endolymphaticus. The term saccus has come from the sac-like appearance. It is a sac-like balloon, that's why it is called as saccus endolymphaticus. And the medial wall of the saccule and the utricle is thickened to form macula. That's a very important thing to remember. The medial wall of saccule and utricle is thickened to form macula in each chamber. So here you can see the saccule and utricle. This is the saccule and this is the utricle, and you can see the openings of this semicircular ducts into the utricle, and in the medial wall of this utricle and saccule there will be macula. The semicircular ducts, so it's same as like we can explain similar to that of the canals, because the 3 semicircular ducts lie within the semicircular canals. It's very easy to remember. Each duct has an ampulla corresponding to the bony canal. So ambula is the dilation which is present at the one opening of the semicircular canals. So that at that particular dilation there is a structure called as the ambula, and the end organ of ambula or the ambulary crest or the crista, it is a sensitive organ to the movement of endolymph. So the endolymph will be circulating through the semicircular canals. So when your head moves, there will be a movement in this particular fluid, and that will be sensed by the ambula crest or the crista, and that's how it maintains the static, no, the kinetic balance of the body, not the static, I'm sorry about that. So the kinetic balance of the body is maintained by this particular organ, that is the end organ of ambula, which is named as the ambulary crest or crista, and the cristae respond to the pressure changes in the endolymph caused by movements of the head, and it maintains the kinetic balance. And while the macula, specialized epithelium in utricle and saccule, it gives information about the position of the head and maintains the static balance. I have told that earlier. In the utricle and saccule, in the medial wall, there is a thickening called as macula, which maintains the static balance, while the ambula or the crista, which is present in the ambula of semicircular ducts, which will be maintaining the kinetic balance of the body. So the same diagram we can see here, the saccule utricle, the semicircular ducts, and how they opens into the utricle. The arterial supply of the internal ear. The labyrinthine branch of basilar artery, then the stylomastoid branch of the posterior auricular artery is supplying the internal ear, and the venous drainage is through the superior and inferior petrosal sinus and the internal jugular veins. So these are the venous drainage. And the nerve supply, as it is a sense organ, it is supplied by the 8th cranial nerve, that is the vestibulocochlear nerve. And the vestibulocochlear nerve, as the name suggests, it is composed of two parts, a cochlear part which helps in hearing and a vestibular part which helps in the equilibrium. The cochlear nerve helps in the hearing, that is the auditory receptors are hair cells of the organ of corti. So we will have another class on the organ of corti and the detailed description. So just have an idea, the organ of corti is the organ of hearing, and which is situated within the modiolus near the base of the spiral lamina, the cochlear nerve, and the central processes which is arising from the peripheral process of this particular nerve will be passing through the modiolus, and that central processes will join to form the cochlear nerve. And the vestibular nerve, the vestibular receptors are maculae of the saccule and utricle, and the cristae of ambula of semicircular duct, which is innervated by the peripheral process of the vestibular nerve or the vestibular ganglion, which is having peripheral process located in this maculae and cristae, which will be stimulated by the movements, and that stimulus will be carried to the vestibular ganglion, and from the vestibular ganglion the central processes which is carrying the information to the brain, central nervous system. So the central processes arising from the vestibular ganglion will be like running into the central nervous system, and they end up by carrying the information to the vestibular nuclei of the brain. So this is how the sensation is carried out, the sensory pathway. The peripheral processes which will get stimulated by the movements, that will carry information to the vestibular ganglion. From there the central processes will carry the information to the vestibular nuclei. So this is the pathway, okay, and this is the basic description regarding the internal ear. Hope you understood the same. So try to just go through the video once again and prepare your own notes, and thank you.